On today's show, what's going to happen with Caris LeVert? We're going to dive into that, his offseason, and answer two other big Cavs questions as we start getting into the Cavs offseason stuff. Let's dive in.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
All right, I'm Chris Manning, covering the Cavs and the NBA for outlets like SB Nation, Cleveland Magazine, the Just Basketball Show, and more. That man over there is Evan Dammarrell. He is the proprietor, the founder of independent site Down Euclid, which covers the entire Cleveland sports scene. As always, we have Jake Stevens producing. The music heard on the way in is our friend from Master Radio. What? I can't see that, Evan. What?
This guy. This is the guy who produced our show.
Okay. Thanks for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, segment 1 today is going to be about Caris LeVert. Segment 2, we're going to ask about how the roster gets remade, reshuffled, retooled because it needs it. And segment 3, do any of the younger guys they have in-house step up, ascend into a bigger role? There's one name in particular I think is probably worth thinking about in that context. But Evan, let's start with Caris LeVert. I think it is highly likely the Cavs bring him back. They kind of have to, right? Like, I think there's not really a world where they can just let him walk for nothing unless the price he gets out there is crazy and you're just like, okay, like whatever. But I just can't imagine he isn't back, even if it's just to trade him in 6 months.
Yeah, you and I were talking about this a little bit off the air. We were having a textual conversation.
I didn't like that. A little weird, but I respect it.
Yeah, that's just the energy I bring to this show as part of your team every day. But regardless, I just, with how limited Cleveland's options are heading into free agency, and I know we talked enough about Dylan Brooks. I think a segment is enough to talk about it, but like that's going to be something in Cavs fans' minds, I guess. But when it comes to just how Caris LeVert functions and just how malleable he's become as a player, and just especially with Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland also being on the floor and just finding that offensive rhythm between the three of them, and then Mobley and Allen too, of course. But LeVert's kind of been just an essential piece for Cleveland off the bench for the second half of the year. And sure, the playoffs weren't a great case study of this, but at least during the regular season, he was essential for Cleveland off the bench. And you really can't afford to let that go, especially just with how dire your depth is to begin with. And you can really break into the minutia of it. Like if you bring him back, at least, is he your lead guard off the bench? Is he the first wing off the bench next to Rubio? Like, there's a lot of ways you can tackle and approach this. And I think that's a bridge we'll cross maybe when we see what the other moves Cleveland makes during free agency are, and just the offseason in general are as well. But LeVert, as you said, isn't a guy you don't want to break the bank for. Sure, the Cavs can go over the cap if they want to sign it because they have his bird rights, but I think there's an agreeable contract. Maybe it's 2 or a 3-year deal that keeps him around, and as you'd said, maybe he's a trade chip down the line too. But just with how dire the depth situation is for the Cavs right now, like, I don't think you're really looking to trade him. You're looking just to keep him around and maybe just keep building off of the success you found in the second half of the season with him being your sixth man.
I think where you get into trading him is that, do you find, like, can you use his salary at some point to find the better? Because while I think like what he did last year was like pretty commendable, and like he played into a role that I don't think is his natural role, and like there were games he looked okay at spots in the playoffs, I do just kind of wonder, like, do we already kind of know like what he's going to kind of be in that sense? Like, do we already kind of know like his fit's not going to be perfect? He's not exactly the fifth guy. I think that's kind of where I would kind of go with LeVert. And we'll see what the salary is. I think the most, like, let me ask you this. Would the most you go be like 18, like the 16 to 18 range for like 2 years? Is that about the cap of where you would go? That's about where I'm at. I'm
going to pull up the numbers you and I were mulling over the other day. Like Bobby Marks floated the idea of 2 years, $36 million. I think I'd do that, whether it's a flat $18 million a year or you front load it and you do like $19 million or something just to give him the satisfaction of making more than what his current contract is. But other than that, no, I wouldn't go much further. So let's say on paper, it's 2 years, 36, or like you make the third year like a team option. And then you see where it goes from there as well. And then in theory, it's a 3-year, $54 million deal. But at most, he's eligible for a 4-year, $101 million deal. And that $101 million deal, and like that's a non-starter for me if I'm Cleveland, because you don't want to be paying your six man about 25 point something million dollars a year. Especially when you have to pay Evan Mobley and you're already paying Garland, Allen, and Mitchell. And then if you extend Mitchell, you have to pay that as well. So there's a number there. I think just at least publicly them saying like, yeah, we want to make a deal happen. We want to make this work. It's just up to the agent and the Cavs, obviously. But it's encouraging enough to see where it's heading. I'm curious to see how far it goes or just what that price tag is. Because maybe there is a team who just like kind of swoops in and pays Caris LeVert more money than the Cavs are comfortable with, but I just don't really see there being like a huge market other than the fact that he is probably at least one of the more desirable free agents that maybe some teams view as attainable.
Here are the teams with projected salary cap space this summer. It's not a list of teams that I think is like Caris LeVert makes sense for us. Houston, Orlando, the Spurs, the Jazz, the Thunder, the Pistons, the Hornets, the Lakers, who are going to probably spend their money on D'Lo and Rui, Indiana, who they got him from, Sacramento, Dallas, Portland's at 13. All these other teams are either not teams that make any sense for LeVert, and teams that don't like have other stuff they're going to do with their money. I think if there's like a market for LeVert, it's like he gets calls from other teams who are better and they're like, hey, do you want to like come win and take less money? But like, I think his position to get the most money for himself, whether that's a 2-year deal or whatever, it's from Cleveland. The question, I think the question just becomes like, is the purpose of it that you really believe in him, or is it to trade him? And I think it is probably more of the latter than anything else. I don't think you're signing and trading him immediately because I just don't know why a team is like hard capping themselves unless it's one of these bad teams and you like figure something out. Maybe something unexpected happens in that way. But I feel like it is like, hey, Caris, we'll take care of you, get you guaranteed money, but like also know that like, you know what, you could be dealt in 6 months if the wing we want becomes available or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically speaking, sign and trades don't happen that often. I know they do when there's scenarios where they do happen, but and no disrespect to Caris LeVert, but like a sign and trade for Caris LeVert just doesn't seem entirely plausible. And you just kind of, like you said, like you just sign him and then you take it on a year-by-year approach. And if a trade materializes or if Cleveland and like a team's just champing at the bit to get Caris LeVert and it somehow finesses you picks or lands you picks if you're the Cavs, yeah, you explore that route. But just with how thin this team is, with Ricky Rubio not being 100% and not like fully certain heading into next year still, and the fact that like it's Dean Wade, maybe Lamar Stevens if he comes back, maybe Dylan Windler if Dylan Windler comes back, but your options are very limited if you're the Cavs, and you can't really be thumbing your nose at chances to just secure just at least your 5th, 6th guy in terms of just offensive scoring.
I mean, just you give up a first-round pick for Caris LeVert. I don't think you're in a world where you're going to trade him. I think that's fair. Just, like you're down this path. I think you're a team that's going to need every kind of potential move possible. I can't imagine a world where you can let him walk. Nothing. But it's okay. We both think LeVert is going to be back. Segment 2, we're going to just talk about the roster reshuffle and how some of the avenues that could happen. But first, today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is the perfect fit. Okay, get that? It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to just fit right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay's guaranteed fit, you can be sure every part of that you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Broncos country. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Evan, you feeling good about your Broncos?
No.
Okay.
We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see.
That's ominous. Thanks again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Every Dayers. We'll be back later today with another episode diving into some of these big Cavs questions. So, Evan, here's where I think the most interesting way the roster gets remade. It is connected to what we talked about, I think, with LeVert. What trades can the Cavs make? What trades do the Cavs try to make? What trades can they pull off? The MLE is not going to yield anyone that I think is like a life-saving player. If they could get like Dante DiVincenzo and like maybe a different like backup center, I think, or a cheap wing on the scrap heap that's like depth, I think that could be great. I don't think that's changing your season. I think the business could be good without it changing your season. I think the biggest move they could possibly make is probably going to be, hey, can we turn Jetty Osman and Dean Wade or Ricky Root? Like, what can we turn these like salaries kind of clustered together? Can we turn those in second round picks into something we really, really like?
So that I just don't think it's probably no. I think the MLE is interesting, and I'm curious to see how the Cavs utilize it. They're not really a team that really dives deep into like committing it to a player. Like last year, they did use a portion of it, or maybe one of their exceptions to sign Ricky Rubio. Just with how thin the market is, and like I said, maybe there's a team just makes an offer Caris LeVert can't say no to, or at least Cleveland just doesn't want to try and compete with. And we'll see how the market materializes and shakes up. But unless you're making a dramatic roster-altering move, which Kobe Altman has made clear isn't happening, like if it's not a Jared Allen trade, because it's safe to assume Garland, Mitchell, and Mobley are the untouchables in this, just in terms of the top end of Cleveland's roster, I don't see anything really that just stirs the drink enough to push the Cavs in a certain way to add like a legitimate wing player. But like Kyle Kuzma is going to go back to the Wizards and get that back. Rui Hachimura is going to stay with the Lakers. Cam Johnson is a name I floated a while back, or earlier this week rather, and like it'd be foolhardy of the Nets not to try and retain him, despite maybe just the glut of wings they have. And maybe there are avenues. Maybe you use Jetty Osman's kind of not fully guaranteed contract and that second rounder, along with future second rounders as well, to maybe go make a move to go get a player like from the Nets or something, if the Nets just feel so inclined to move off like Dorian Finney-Smith or even Royce O'Neal to add luxury or salary relief with Osman's contract and also second round picks for their trouble. And there's ways you could go about it, but like the Cavs' big move was to go get Donovan Mitchell, and now they are limited asset wise to like go make the next step to kind of keep fleshing this out. And that's just the reality of the situation. The step-in rules in place, so the Cavs just can't go firing off every single first round pick they have just to round out this roster.
Yeah, I think someone like Cam Johnson is, like, with the reporting out of Brooklyn that we've seen is, and Champs, I think, had this most prominently. They want to keep Cam Johnson. They're obviously keeping Mikal Bridges. If they're going to trade people, it's going to be DFS, and it's going to be Royce O'Neal. That's like the class of wing I think you're looking at. What I would say is that, like, I don't think these things we're going to call these things like roster reshuffling or like roster remaking. I think maybe I like put the wrong kind of on this segment maybe. But what I think is that, like, if there are moves that they should be able to make in some way, shape, or form that do give you different options than what happened this year. I don't think anyone, be it the coaches, the front office, the fan base, the players themselves, I don't think the ownership, I don't think anyone's going to be happy if you got to like April next year and it's like, well, you know what, like we really did just like run this back and there's maybe like one minimum setting. I think you do need to do something to inject options into like that Dean Wade, Caris LeVert, Ricky Rubio, Lamar Stevens like class of player. Like I think you have to find the avenues and do something to give yourself a different option there. Maybe it's part of the MLE. I think if it's like you got DiVincenzo and like Josh Richardson and you flipped Osmond for something else or maybe even Wade, I think you come out looking at a better roster. We'll do a mock off season at some point, like do this exercise in full and really kind of look at some of these names. It just I think it will feel like they're definitely just to me missing an opportunity and missing the point of this if they kind of really do like truly quote unquote run it back. I don't think they will, but if that's what happens and they isn't like some efforts to shake up what is going on here, that to me will be a problem.
So to your point, like that Dean Wade, Lamar Stevens-esque roller spot, maybe Isaiah Mobley is a guy that the Cavs bring up from that two-way deal to a contract that's similarly structured to Wade's or Stevens, where it's fake money and it gives the Cavs financial space, but clearly they're not going to waive the older brother of one of your franchise's best players. Who knows? But the business is that cutthroat. But maybe it's Mobley in that regard. Kobe Altman did tell me that like he and his staff think of their international prospects. Khalifa Diop is the most NBA ready, but they're going to keep him overseas. They're also going to keep Luke Travers overseas. So like those are two avenues that are just now gone. So maybe you look at guys in the charge. I know Sam Merrill is technically still around too, so maybe Sam Merrill carves out minutes in this rotation somehow, some way. And as you said, you just look at the grand scope of the free agency market or just like what trades are like viable for the Cavs, and there really aren't any. And who knows, like Kobe Altman seemed to have learned from David Griffin a little bit to make something out of when it seems like it's seemingly nothing, and just make trades happen in ways that just kind of boggle the mind a little bit. But I'm curious, like this is a huge offseason for Kobe Altman, because him going on the record and saying like, hey, we're more or less just keeping things the way they are and building upon the success of this year and seeing how next season goes, like that's a pretty like dire stake or like a hasty stake you want to make on this season, especially just because you see how bad it was during the playoffs, and just you figure it out from there. Like, I don't know, there's like Isaac Okoro, maybe he's a trade chip to a team as well.
Yeah, curious to see what happens with Okoro. I wonder if there's any smoke in the air about, because he's extension eligible as well. Mobley is not yet. Okoro is the one who is now. He's the same. He's now. We'll see. I'm kind of curious. I don't think they will, but I'm curious to see how that might look. Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. It's so easy to get caught up in what everyone else needs from you and never take a moment to think about what you need for yourself. But when we spend all of our time giving, it can leave us feeling stretched thin and burned out. Therapy can give you the tools to find more balance in your life, so you can keep supporting others without leaving yourself behind. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It is entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime at no additional charge. Therapy is a great tool. I go every 2 weeks. I have an appointment. I might be in therapy when you're listening to this right now, because I do have an appointment virtually that day, and I'm very excited about that. Find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. So Evan, I'm gonna play rapid fire with you with some names here. Some younger guys that could step up, come over. I want to go in order. I'm gonna do this in some order of, I think they could be like interesting next season, not the future, not next season. We're not going to talk about job.
Wait, is it for next season? Because you just said not next season.
I mean, sorry, we're going to do them for next season, and we'll see how that goes.
Roger that.
First name, Mamadi Diakite.
If he's your fourth or fifth big, sure, but like playing meaningful minutes, no.
Yeah, I'm just like he is what he is. I don't think he's that good. All right, Travers.
No.
He's gone to a bigger club. We should have hit on this when it happened, but he's at a bigger club now in Australia, and I feels like a leveling up for him to set the stage for him eventually coming to the NBA. So there's I googled Luke Travers real quick, and there's like these headlines where it's like Giddey says so he dinked a 3-year deal with Melbourne. It's Melbourne, not Melbourne United. Curious to see like if there's upside. I'm curious to see what that means for him. The vibe with that was that he was pretty far away. But yeah, next season out of the question. But I'm curious to see what the plan will be for him long term, because that's like a way, like if he panned out, that would be like a way you kind of just like have a wing in your system, even if it's not exactly like your in-house development kind of stuff. But curious to see what he looks like at a bigger club next year. All right, let's go to Sam Merrill. Where are you at on Sam Merrill?
The idea of Sam Merrill makes a lot of sense on paper for this Cavs team. I just don't know if he has the athleticism to really hang at the NBA level, and I'm sure Jackson Flickinger's listening right now and just either wrecked his car or punched a hole in his office wall.
He stopped listening when we said Jetty Osman. I suggested the Cavs should trade Jetty Osman. He just was like, all right, I'm out. I've heard enough.
Fair enough. The idea of Luke Travers, yes, but not Luke Travers, excuse me. Sam Merrill, yes, but I think there's a player there, but it's somewhat similar to that Diakite spot where if he's your third or fourth guard off the bench in your rotation, that's fine, but like you're not asking him to play reliable minutes on a night-to-night basis for you.
I like that template of guard of like a guy who can shoot it, a guy who can slash a little bit and give you a little supplemental ball handling. I like that template of like a guard as a bench piece. What I wonder is like if you with like DiVincenzo, is there like a better version of that you could use that is on the market? And do you have room for that with two guards plus LeVert plus maybe Ruby? Like, do you even have like a real need like openness for that player in that sense? I think that's like a real question. All right, the main event of this to me, Evan, is Isaiah Mobley. Because I think two things coming out of the playoffs and this season. Number one, I think you could use a real backup center. And number two, I think it's kind of clear that as much as Robin Lopez is like a vet and like I think provided something and I understood the signing, I think you need something more from that, where if you needed to play another big in the playoffs, you could do it depending on what happens with Evan Mobley. We will talk about Evan Mobley a ton in the episode after this. I'm really curious to see, like how much bigger he gets, how much more full-time center he could play next year. That's like a real open question. But I think like finding another center is on the list for me. And if you're looking at options, it's like, okay, I think running it back with Rolo won't really work. You could throw money at Mason Plumlee for a year, and I don't think that would be a horrendous option. But can you even get him? Like, is there any other options? Yes, like you're playing in like this very deep veteran pool. Isaiah Mobley, you drafted. I had put up good numbers with the charge. I'm curious to see what the Cavs will do with that because he's coming off a 2A. Do they sign him to an actual contract? Do they like try to play him next year? I'm really curious to see how they handle him, because if there's anyone from their like young brigade of guys is going to have minutes next year, he would be the most likely one.
I agree with you. I think the Cavs going the route of Robin Lopez and before that Ed Davis, just like as serviceable bigs, and you're hoping that Allen and Mobley can soak up most of the center minutes, and ideally that's the goal going forward next year as well. But I think just getting a younger option, whether that's Isaiah Mobley or as you had said, Mason Plumlee as well, like you could throw in like pie in the sky scenario, like maybe Naz Reid is your option, but I don't see Minnesota letting him walk that easily, even though he's a unrestricted free agent.
Yeah. Would you like you'd I think you'd have to burn like the full MLE on him, and I don't know if it would be like a weird use of money.
It would be. And, like, sure, there's other guys, maybe like Drew Eubanks or Mo Wagner if he leaves Orlando, doesn't want to play with his brother anymore. Maybe Thomas Bryant leaves the Nuggets and gets more of a carved-out role with the Cavs. But at the same time, you have to look at it. Ideally, you're playing Jared Allen and Evan Mobley combined 96 minutes, whether that's between power forward or the center spot, just depending on lineups, rotations, things like that. And a guy like Isaiah Mobley, one, you can sign on the cheap, so that's more of a financial savvy move. But two, is a guy who isn't going to be expecting to play every single night either. So, like, you got the Plumlees or the Eubanks or the Wagners or the Bryants of the world, or even Naz Reid, like, you have to carve out minutes in the rotation. And I don't think having like a third big that plays on a night-to-night basis is a super pressing need if you're the Cavs, because you need depth in so many other spots, whether it's on the wing or just especially just in terms of perimeter scoring in general, that, yeah, it makes sense to invest in a younger, maybe more, I don't want to say effective option, but just a younger option as your third big off the bench is a smart move. Isaiah Mobley said that's kind of what he envisions his role being when he was first drafted by the Cavs, just being that backup to his brother and Jarrett. But you're not really looking to sign a guy that's like expecting to play minutes either, because you're set at the big spot. Like, you should be looking elsewhere in terms of just like carving out minutes in your rotation.
The only thing I would say about like finding a big to play minutes is I think you have to find the rebounding thing is a real issue.
Oh, the rebounding thing's a huge issue. But the thing is, like, if you have a guy that is ready and doesn't have to play on a night-to-night basis, that's great. So when you run into those issues and you need to shorten up or change up the rotation because Dean Wade just wasn't giving you that rebounding edge, even though he's technically a big, or like Lamar Stevens didn't play until the very last game of the season, like, that's fine, but you just need a guy that probably just is penciled into that role. And again, no disrespect to guys like Robin Lopez, who's 35, or Ed Davis, whose age I can't remember from when he played for the Cavs, but like guys that are older and can't give you that juice at times. Like, you just need a younger set of legs, and probably a younger set of legs that are just perfectly content with not playing every single night.
I really do just wonder if next year, if part of what they do, especially if you can't, like, Dean Wade is what he is, and you'll see what happens with Lamar. Is it not guaranteed? Do they extend him? Mm-hmm. What happens there? That's another question. I wonder if, like, they say, okay, like, we maybe need to look at this and say another center who can give us minutes and play with Evan next year more, and that requires other shooting. That would require, like, the roster getting figured out in a certain way. I'm curious to see what that would look like. But that, to me, if you're trying to solve the rebounding issue, another center who you can actually play with regularity, be it Isaiah Mobley, be it a veteran, and maybe it's Mobley and he plays 60-something games in spot minutes, and that's like enough to kind of fix this. That to me feels like one of the ways you could go about it. I feel like that's more likely than finding like that's like better than Dean Wade with the prices you have. I think like a center, considering how cheap centers can be, feels like the structural way you could do it. And that just feels like the rebounding issue feels to me like something you could fix maybe a little bit easier than some of the shooting issues, is where I would go. Like, the shooting issues are just going to be like, can you really overhaul the wing room over time? The rebounding thing, I think a different strategy with some better toughness, but also maybe you just play a third center a little bit more to get to kind of eliminate the offensive rebounding stuff. I think that might be worth looking.
I think it would be as well, but just my other issue with it is JB Bickerstaff's a guy who only goes 8 or 9 players deep. So there's only so many minutes to go around, especially when the Cavs lean so heavily on their starters. And like, I'm looking at free agent power forwards.
But if you had better, the open question to me about the Bickerstaff thing is, if they had options he liked better, would he go a little bit deeper and not play the starters as much? I think that is like an open question.
That's a fair open question for sure. But like, let me throw this name at you. Like, does O'Shea Brissett do anything for you as a guy who's like more of a tweener, who's like a bigger forward who can play at 3-4?
No, not really.
So
that doesn't like change anything for me. I really think it's the center stuff.
That's, you and I are in a Fiondu Kabengele season. Come on back, buddy. But I agree with you. unless just like a player materializes through a trade or just falls into Cleveland's lap, I just don't see it being an option. And to your point, like centers are more of an abundant position, at least, where you could like explore whether it's Isaiah Mobley or maybe like Goga. Like you just go look at Goga and try that out or something too. Like there's names that you could just kind of throw out there. Maybe one of them sticks, but it feels like Isaiah Mobley, where you just spent all this time, energy, and resources developing him in-house with the Charge last year, that it just makes a little too much sense just to sign him on a Lamar Stevens, Dean Wade-like deal to just keep him around longer. And instead of spending his time with the Charge, he's now just with the Cavs on a permanent basis.
Yeah, that's where I wonder if you're looking at like veterans in the market. Xavier Tillman would be the one I would like gone after hard, but he's not going to get out of Memphis. Mason Plumlee, I think, would make sense. Dwight Powell is like a rim runner, not a great defender, but that's what Evan Mobley's like. I think Dwight Powell could be like a sneaky little useful thing there, but then it's like Biyombo and like and
Evan Love.
Like, hey, you know what? They messed that up. Like Willie Cauley-Stein's and due for me. Gorgui Dieng is just like still around. Like I don't think that's like really doing it for me. It's tough.
Cody Zeller.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't tell if Cody Zeller is like revitalized or if it's just like Miami has the secret juice, just the fountain of youth, a Lazarus pit, just like in South Beach somewhere. But we're gonna end there. Everydayers, we are gonna be back tomorrow or later today, rather, talking in detail about Evan Mobley. Thank you again for making us your first listen every day. Thanks again to Jake Stevens for producing. Back at you with another one for this.